Echo 7. The camera saw what happened. Nobody can explain it.
A bag of pretzels on a trunk. A bumper jack still up at 4 in the morning. A wedding ring that never appeared in any pawn shop. A driver's seat pushed back too far for the woman who owned the car to have been the last person driving it. A folded set of bloody underwear on the console of a 1965 Mercury Comet. A letter postmarked the day after a teenage girl disappeared, telling her family she had gone to Houston, in handwriting that was not hers. 3 girls who walked into a Sears parking garage 2 days before Christmas and never walked out. 12 people, 12 lots, 12 cars left behind. This is Echo 7. Tonight, no one is in the woods. Every case in this investigation is real. Every name is real. The records were obtained through Charlie Project case summaries, Namus missing persons files, FBI cold case bulletins, county sheriff press releases from San Bernardino, Fresno, Marietta, Crystal City, Searcy, Carmel, Everett, Longview, Fort Worth, and Lee County, and surviving newspaper archives from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the Press Courier, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and the Fresno Bee. The physical evidence I describe is what investigators actually found. The dates, the times, the makes and models of the cars, the specific stores, the position of the driver's seat, the exact words on a mailed letter, all of it is documented. I have rounded nothing. I have invented nothing. The lots are still there. You can drive to them tonight if you want to. I would not recommend it. 12 people in this investigation walked into shopping centers in 12 different American states. They walked toward their cars. They never reached them. Or they reached them and then went somewhere else. Or they reached them and then went nowhere at all, because their cars were left exactly where they had parked them, with the keys still in the ignition, or the doors still hanging open, or in one case, the personal effects of the driver placed neatly inside the locked vehicle by hands that no camera ever recorded. The earliest of these cases occurred when the youngest of these victims would have been 10 years old. The most recent occurred while I was finishing the first draft of this investigation. In none of the 12 has a body been found. In none of the 12 has anyone been arrested for the disappearance itself, though in 2 of the 12 a person of interest has been named, in one case publicly, in one case only in conversations with the family. None of the 12 has been forgotten. All of them have been waiting. Tonight, you are going to learn what happened in the parking lot of a department store in Atlanta in the autumn of 1965. You are going to learn about a young woman whose father found her car in a Ventura shopping center at 5 in the morning, still on a bumper jack with a flat tire that had been deliberately punctured. You are going to learn about 3 girls who went Christmas shopping in Fort Worth and never came home, and a letter that arrived for one of their husbands the next day. You are going to learn about a 17-year-old in Florida who set her pretzels on the trunk of her car and was never seen again. You are going to learn about a high school senior in Missouri whose father was the local pastor. About a 20-year-old in Arkansas who took out a .38 Rossi revolver because he was afraid of the man he was about to meet. About a teenager in New York whose underwear was found 5 years later in the suitcase of a man arrested for raping someone else. About a teacher in California whose husband was already proposing to his girlfriend 3 days after she vanished. About a Cherokee social worker whose pickup truck was found in a mall lot looking like someone had detail washed it. About a country singer in Texas whose driver's seat was pushed back farther than her own legs could reach. About a Walmart shoplifter in Georgia who threw down her purse and ran. About a man with a brain injury in California who walked toward a gas station and never reached it. That is 12. There are more. There were more before the 12, and there will be more after. And most of them will never be on a video like this one because no one ever asked the right question at the right time, or because the family quietly stopped pressing the police, or because a detective retired and the case file was moved to a basement that floods every spring. What you are about to hear is the part of the pattern that survived the basements. I am going to start with the oldest case in this set because the oldest case is also the one documented in the most detail by the most people over the longest period of time. It was investigated by the Atlanta Police Department, by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, by a private detective hired by the family, by 3 independent researchers since, and by a documentary film released on the 60th anniversary of the disappearance in October of 2025. Most of what we know has been written down somewhere. The original investigative case file did not survive. Sometime between 1965 and the present, the police file vanished from the Atlanta Police Department's storage system. 600 pages, gone. No one knows when. No one knows who. The detective who continues to work the case in his 80s has reconstructed it from his own notes, from interviews, and from copies family members had retained. The case file disappeared from a department records room in approximately the same fashion the woman disappeared from a parking lot, without explanation, without a witness. Her name was Mary Shotwell Little. She was 25 years old. She had been married for 6 weeks. Her husband Roy was an auditor at the same bank where Mary worked as a secretary. They had bought their first apartment together in Decatur, Georgia, on Line Circle. The apartment was small, and the rent was reasonable, and they were planning to entertain friends that Friday night, the 15th of October, 1965. Roy was on a business trip Thursday. He was due back Friday morning. Mary had told her boss earlier that week that she was looking forward to the weekend. On Thursday the 14th, she finished work at 5. She drove the half-mile from her bank's downtown branch to the Lenox Square shopping center in the Buckhead district of Atlanta, where she had agreed to meet a co-worker named Illa for dinner at the S&S cafeteria. Before the cafeteria, Mary stopped at the Colonial Grocery inside the mall. She bought ingredients for the Friday dinner: pork chops, a bag of rice, a box of cake mix, a jar of pickles. The receipt was found later in the front seat of her car. The receipt was time-stamped 6:23 in the evening. Mary and Illa had dinner. They talked for over an hour. Illa later described Mary as relaxed and looking forward to seeing Roy the next day. Mary mentioned the bouquet of flowers that had been delivered to her at the office 2 weeks earlier from a man whose identity she did not know. She had been receiving phone calls at her desk for several months from a man whose voice she did not recognize, who would tell her things she did not want to hear and then hang up. Roy had told her not to worry about it. The flowers had unsettled her more than the calls. She had thrown them away that same afternoon. She had not told her husband. Mary said goodbye to Illa in the cafeteria around 8 in the evening. The last words anyone in Atlanta heard her speak were, "See you." She walked out of the restaurant alone. Her car, a 1965 Mercury Comet in metallic pearl gray, was parked in section yellow 32 of the Lenox Square parking lot. The bag of groceries was in the back seat. She had a London fog raincoat draped over her arm. The temperature in Atlanta that evening was 62 degrees. There was no rain forecast for the weekend. Mary did not arrive home in Decatur. Roy did not know this because Roy was still out of town. Mary did not arrive at work the next morning. The bank switchboard called the Decatur apartment at 9 and got no answer. They called Roy's hotel. He was already on his way back. The bank's vice president called the police at 10. By the time the first patrol car reached Lenox Square, Mary's car was not in section yellow 32. The mall's security guard, a man who walked the parking lot every weekday morning to spot abandoned vehicles, had walked past yellow 32 at 9. The Mercury Comet was not there at 9. He was certain of this because the car would have been parked overnight, which always caught his attention. At 12:15 in the afternoon, Mary's boss drove to the mall to look for the car himself. He found the Mercury in yellow 32. He had walked past yellow 32 earlier that morning, before he had been told the car would be there, and he had not noticed any car in the space. He had not been looking for a car. He had been buying coffee. But he was certain enough about it to remark on it to the responding detectives. The space had been empty in the morning, and the car was in it at noon. Whoever had returned the car to the mall had returned it to the exact space Mary had parked it in between the morning rounds of the security guard and the lunchtime visit of the boss. Inside the car, the detectives found things that should not have been there. The bag of groceries from the Colonial was on the back seat with one bag of rice that had spilled in the journey. Mary's London fog raincoat was on the front passenger seat, folded. On the center console between the front seats, there was a folded set of women's underwear that Mary's family later confirmed was hers. The underwear was clean. It had been folded with care. There were dark marks on the fabric that the police lab later determined to be Mary's own blood. The same kind of dark marks were on the steering wheel, on the inside of the driver's door, and in 2 small spots on the exterior of the car near the gas tank. The car had been wiped down before being returned. The cleaning had been thorough, but not perfect. Whoever had done it had missed the underwear and the steering wheel and the gas tank. The odometer of the mercury showed 40 miles more than Mary's last service receipt indicated. 40 miles, accumulated overnight. The car had been driven somewhere and back. The exterior of the mercury was coated in a film of fine red dust. The dust did not match the surface of any parking lot in Atlanta. Some Atlanta detectives in the days that followed thought the dust came from the exposed clay roads in North Georgia. Other detectives thought it came from a particular construction site that had been excavating red Georgia clay that summer. No one ever traced the dust to a specific location. The next pieces of evidence came from out of state. On the morning of October 16th, an attendant at an all-night gas station in Charlotte, North Carolina, processed a credit card transaction that would later be matched to Mary's gasoline card. The signature on the receipt looked like Mary's signature, though it was shaky. The attendant remembered the transaction because the woman who had paid was sitting in the passenger seat of a car driven by a man, and the woman had what looked like a fresh cut on her forehead, and she had been holding her hand over the side of her face turned toward him, hiding it from him. The attendant had been a Marine in Korea. He noticed things like that. The man in the driver's seat was, the attendant said, giving the woman directions, telling her how to sign the receipt, telling her where to put the carbon copy, telling her in short instructions what to do with her hands. The same gasoline card was used again 12 hours later in the late afternoon of October 16th at a service station in Raleigh, North Carolina. The Raleigh attendant had no specific memory of the transaction. The signature on that receipt was less like Mary's. The card was never used again. Roy reported it canceled the same week. Mary's body was never found, and Mary herself was never seen again by any person who could be located and interviewed by Atlanta detectives or by FBI agents over the following 60 years. The detective in charge in 1965 was a man named Jim Ponder. He was the FBI liaison to local police, a Navy veteran who had been wounded at D-Day. He worked organized crime cases and Klansman cases for a decade, and he treated Mary's disappearance the same way. He sent teletypes to Washington. He flew to Charlotte and Raleigh. He sat with the gas station attendants until they had given him every detail they could remember. He searched abandoned wells and old construction sites and the wooded areas along the new 4-lane Northeast Expressway. He did not find anything. He retired without finding her. He kept his notes in a binder. The current detective working the case, a man named Ray Pate, who is in his 80s, has been working from those notes ever since. 18 months after Mary disappeared, in the spring of 1967, a woman named Diane Shields was found murdered in her apartment in Atlanta. Diane had Mary's exact job. She was a secretary at C&S Bank. She worked at the same downtown branch. She knew several of Mary's co-workers. The two women had not been close friends, but they had spoken to each other at office events. The Atlanta police initially considered the cases connected. Within a few months, they decided the connection was coincidental. The Diane Shields case is also unsolved. 2 secretaries from the same Atlanta bank killed or disappeared 18 months apart, both unsolved 60 years later. The Atlanta Police Department's official position remains that the cases are not related. What kind of person leaves the underwear of his victim folded on the console of her own car? What kind of person drives the car 40 miles overnight, returns it to the exact parking space the victim had used, wipes down the surfaces but misses the gas tank? What kind of person uses the victim's credit card the next morning at a gas station in another state with the victim sitting in the passenger seat of his car? None of these are the actions of a person who panicked and ran. They are the actions of a person who took his time, who decided what to leave behind. Whoever took Mary wanted Atlanta to find what he had left in her car. The car was returned to its exact original position because the position itself was part of what he wanted us to see. He wanted us to know he could put her car back where she had left it while she was somewhere else. He wanted us to know, 60 years later, that we still do not know where, That is the case I want you to hold in your mind as the rest of this investigation unfolds. Hold the underwear on the console. Hold the 40 miles on the odometer. Hold the gas station attendant in Charlotte, who knew, because he had been a Marine in Korea, that the woman in the passenger seat was being told what to do by the man behind the wheel. Hold Roy, returning home from his business trip on Friday, walking up the steps of the apartment on Line Circle to find that his wife had not come home and that the police were already at his door. The next case took place 5 years later in California, in a parking lot smaller than Lenox Square but no less surveilled. It is a case in which the act that led to the disappearance was visible to several witnesses, and in which the witnesses thought what they saw was so ordinary that they did not even slow down to confirm it. The lot was the Buenaventura shopping center in Ventura, California. The store was the Broadway department store, where a 19-year-old college student named Cindy Lee Mellin worked part-time as a sales clerk. The night was Tuesday, the 20th of January, 1970. Cindy was studying at Ventura College during the day. She wore contact lenses now, instead of the glasses she had worn as a child. She lived with her parents and her 4 sisters in a house on North Linda Vista Avenue. Her father, Leonard, was a draftsman for an offshore oil company. He had taught his daughters many things, but he had not, by his own admission later, taught Cindy how to use a bumper jack or change a flat tire. He had assumed she would always call him for that. The Broadway department store at the Buenaventura shopping center fronted on South Mills Drive. Employees were not permitted to park in the customer lot directly in front of the store. They were required to park in the back of the lot, along Main Street, well behind the building. The walk from the employee entrance to the back of the lot took about 3 minutes. Cindy had complained to her sister once that she did not like making this walk at night. Her sister had asked why she did not park closer like some of the other employees. Cindy had said the rules were the rules. She did not break them. She made the walk. Cindy clocked out around 10 in the evening on the 20th of January. The store closed at 9:30. She had stayed late to finish her end of shift duties. She was wearing a navy blue dress with red buttons, a brown corduroy 3/4 coat, blue shoes with gold buckles, a single gold ring with a pearl, and a red ribbon in her hair. She walked out of the back employee exit and across the dark parking lot toward her car. At 10:30 in the evening, 2 of Cindy's co-workers were driving slowly out of the lot. Their husbands had picked them up and they were heading home. As they passed the back row, they noticed Cindy standing beside her car in the parking lot lights. A man was kneeling beside the car, working on the rear left tire. The car was up on a bumper jack. The hood was open. The man was tall and slim, white, between 30 and 40 years old. He was driving a light-colored car parked 1 space away. The co-workers thought the man was Cindy's father. They drove past, continued to a nearby restaurant, and had coffee. They drove past the lot again about 30 minutes later and noticed that Cindy and the man and the second car were all gone, and that Cindy's car was still in the same spot. They assumed Cindy had ridden home with her father. The next morning, at 4:45, Leonard woke up. Something had pulled him out of sleep. He realized he did not remember hearing his daughter come home. He looked in her room and saw she was not there. He walked outside to look for her car in the driveway, and the car was not there either. He drove to the Buenaventura shopping center. The drive took him about 5 minutes. He arrived at the back row of the lot in the early light before sunrise. Cindy's car was still on the bumper jack. The flat tire was still attached to the wheel. The spare tire was lying on the asphalt next to the car. The driver door, the passenger door, the trunk, and the glove compartment were all standing open. There was no one in or near the car. Leonard walked around the vehicle once. Then he walked around it again. He examined the flat tire. There was a clean slit in the side wall about 2 inches long. The slit had been made with a knife. The tire had not gone flat from running over a nail or a piece of glass. The tire had been deliberately punctured before Cindy had clocked out for the night, while the car had been sitting in the back row of the lot, unattended, in the hours during her shift. Leonard understood this immediately. He understood that whoever had punctured the tire had known where the employees parked. Whoever had punctured the tire had known Cindy's shift schedule. Whoever had punctured the tire had been waiting for her in the dark while she had been working her register inside the brightly lit store. Leonard called the Ventura police from a payphone. By mid-morning, the lot was full of detectives. Within 48 hours, the case had reached the front page of the Press Courier, the local paper, under the headline "VC Co-ed Feared Kidnapped." Detective Sergeant Ken Cozzens told the press that the evidence indicated the girl had been forcibly taken. The two co-workers who had driven past at 10:30 came forward when they read the paper. They described the man they had seen. Tall, slim, white, 30 to 40, light-colored car. They had not been close enough to give a more detailed description of his face. They had only assumed he was Leonard. He was not Leonard. Leonard was at home asleep at 10:30 in the evening. The man kneeling next to Cindy's car was someone neither Cindy nor her family had ever knowingly met. Cindy was never found. The man was never identified. The light-colored car was never traced. The Ventura police followed up on a tip that placed Cindy in a topless bar in Salem, Oregon, several months later. The tip went nowhere. They followed up on a tip that placed her in Fresno. That tip also went nowhere. Her father, Leonard, died in 1981. Her mother, Ardis, had died of a stroke 6 years before that. 3 of Cindy's sisters have since died. Her surviving sister is in her 80s. The Broadway department store became a Macy's. A sales clerk who worked in the Macy's in 2022 told a local writer that the store was haunted. She knew the ghost's name. The clerk had not been alive in 1970. She did not know how she knew the name. She just did. What I want you to notice about Cindy's case is that the pattern was not opportunistic. The man who took Cindy did not stumble across her by chance. He had stalked her. He knew when her shifts ended. He knew where employees were required to park. He knew which car was hers. He had punctured her tire while she was working a register, knowing she would emerge into the dark lot hours later and find herself stranded. He had positioned himself in the lot and waited. When she came out, he approached her with the offer of help anyone in her position would have accepted. She did not walk back inside the store. She accepted the assistance of the stranger, who was already kneeling at her tire by the time she walked up. She got close enough to him for him to control what happened next, and then she was gone. I want to be specific about something here, because it matters across all 12 cases. The man who took Cindy did not kidnap her in the way Hollywood depicts kidnappings. There was no violent struggle. There were no screams. There were no witnesses to a physical assault, because there was no physical assault that would have been visible to the witnesses. The two co-workers drove past, saw a man helping a girl change a tire, and continued on their way. Cindy did not appear to be in distress. Whatever happened to her happened between 10:30 and the moment Leonard arrived at 4:45 the following morning. 6 hours. 1 bumper jack, 1 slit tire, 1 tall man in a light-colored car, and nothing. This is the part of the pattern that matters most. The men who take the people in this investigation are not chasing strangers across parking lots. They are not jumping out of bushes. They are presenting themselves as something familiar. A father helping his daughter change a tire. A motorist who happened to stop at the right moment. A friendly face who spoke to her in line at the customer service desk. The victims of these abductions are not always running. Sometimes they are walking calmly with a stranger toward what they believe is a routine resolution to a small problem. Sometimes the small problem was created by the stranger. The stranger, in the case of Cindy, was already at the scene of the crime he was about to commit before she even clocked out of her shift. The 4 years between Cindy's disappearance in 1970 and the next case in this investigation cover a period in which retail surveillance in America was almost entirely absent. There were no parking lot cameras at the Buenaventura shopping center in 1970. There were no parking lot cameras at the Seminary South Shopping Center in Fort Worth, Texas, on the morning of December 23, 1974. There were no parking lot cameras at most American shopping centers until the early 1980s at the soonest. What this means is that for the cases of this era, we do not have video. We have witness statements. We have physical evidence. We have police reports written on typewriters by detectives who are now dead. We have the memories of family members who were children at the time and are now in their 60s. The case I am about to describe involves 3 victims. They are the youngest in this investigation. The oldest of the 3 was 17, recently married, a senior in high school. The youngest was 9 years old, a 4th grader. The third was a 14-year-old who had been dating one of the older girl's husband's brothers. The 3 of them got into a 1972 Oldsmobile 98 at noon on December 23, 1974, drove to a surplus store to pick up an item on layaway, and then drove to the Seminary South Shopping Center in South Fort Worth. They parked in the upper level of the Sears parking garage. They were seen separately by several witnesses inside the mall during the afternoon. The 17-year-old was overheard talking about a Christmas party she was going to attend that evening. The 14-year-old was looking at jewelry. The 9-year-old was eating a snow cone outside a Dipper Dan ice cream shop. At 6 in the evening, the husband of the 17-year-old, his brother, and the families of the other 2 girls began to worry. The 14-year-old's mother had called the 17-year-old's apartment around 5:30 to see if the girls had come home. The husband had not seen them. The 4 parents and the husband converged on the Seminary South Shopping Center around 6:15. They went to the upper level of the Sears parking garage. The Oldsmobile 98 was where the 17-year-old had said she was going to park it. They knew this because she had told her brother that morning where in the lot she would park. The brother was 11 years old. He had paid attention to that detail because he had been jealous that the older girls were going to the mall without him. The Oldsmobile was locked. The keys were not in the ignition. They were not on the ground around the car. They were not in any of the obvious places people leave keys when they drop them. Through the driver's side window, the families could see the Christmas presents the girls had bought, wrapped and stacked on the rear floorboard. They could see what they identified later as the 14-year-old's purse, the 17-year-old's purse, and a pair of mittens that belonged to the 9-year-old. Everything looked normal. The car looked like it was waiting for the girls to come back from doing one more errand inside the mall. They waited. They went back inside the mall. They asked at the Sears customer service desk if anyone had seen 3 girls matching the descriptions. No one had. They went to the security office of the shopping center. The security officer told them the mall closed at 9 on weekdays during the holiday season. He suggested they wait until closing and see if the girls came back to their car. They waited until closing. The girls did not come back. By 11 that night, the Fort Worth Police Department had been called. The responding officers wrote the case up as a probable runaway. 3 teenage girls, 2 days before Christmas, had decided to go on an adventure together. The 17-year-old was newly married. Maybe she was having problems with her husband. Maybe the others had gone with her. The detective assigned to the youth division would pick up the case in the morning. In the meantime, everyone should go home. There was nothing to be done. The next morning, in the mailbox of the 17-year-old's apartment, there was a letter. It was addressed to her husband, but his name was spelled formally on the envelope. He never went by that formal version of his name. The 17-year-old had never written to him by that formal version of his name. The handwriting on the envelope was in pencil. The handwriting on the letter inside was in pen. The paper of the letter was wider than the envelope. The letter had been folded down to fit. The postmark on the envelope was blurred. 2 of the digits in the zip code were illegible. The letter said that the 3 girls had gone to Houston for a week, that they were sorry to have left without telling anyone, that the car was in the Sears upper lot, that she would be back in a week. The letter was signed with the 17-year-old's first name in a handwriting that her family did not recognize. The Federal Bureau of Investigation took the letter into evidence. They sent it to their handwriting laboratory in Washington. The handwriting analysis came back inconclusive. The lab could not say with certainty whether the letter had been written by the 17-year-old or not. There were similarities to her handwriting. There were also differences. The most that could be said was that someone had written the letter who either was the 17-year-old or who had access to a sample of her handwriting and had been trying to copy it. The girls did not come back from Houston in a week. They did not come back from Houston ever. No one in Houston ever reported seeing them. No motel clerk, no bus station ticket agent, no payphone receipt, no record of any kind ever surfaced that placed any of the 3 girls in Houston, Texas, at any point during the rest of 1974 or any of the years that followed. The letter was a fabrication. Someone had wanted the families to believe the girls had run away. Someone had taken the time to write a letter, postmark it from a small town in north-central Texas the day after the disappearance, and slip it into the apartment mailbox of a man whose wife was not coming home. 9 years old, 14, 17. The small one had been dressed in jeans and a white sweater with a smiling rainbow applique on the front. The 14-year-old had been wearing purple bell-bottom pants and a yellow shirt and a promise ring with a single small stone that her boyfriend, the 17-year-old's husband's brother, had given her 3 weeks earlier. The 17-year-old had been wearing the wedding ring she had received 6 months before. None of those items have ever been recovered. The girls themselves have never been recovered. The Sears parking garage where the Oldsmobile was found has since been demolished, redeveloped, paved over. The Seminary South Shopping Center became an outlet mall, then a mixed-use development, then something else. The exact spot where the upper-level parking garage stood is now part of a pedestrian plaza near a chain restaurant. People walk through that plaza every weekend without knowing what they are walking through. Several years after the disappearance, a witness came forward who said she had seen the 3 girls being forced into the back of a yellow pickup truck near a Buddy's grocery store at the edge of the shopping center. The witness was described in police reports as having been at the Buddy's on the afternoon of December 23rd. She had told a store clerk what she had seen. The clerk had not made a report. The witness had then driven away. Years later, the clerk had remembered the conversation and had described it to a Fort Worth detective named D.A. Hudson, who had publicized the yellow pickup truck account in 1979. The original witness was never located. The yellow pickup truck was never found. In 1981, a separate witness reported seeing a man forcing what appeared to be a young woman into a vehicle in the same area and being told by a man inside the vehicle to mind his own business because it was a family dispute. That witness's account also went nowhere. In April of 2001, a former Fort Worth police officer who had also worked as a private security guard at the Seminary South Sears outlet in 1974 came forward to say that on the afternoon of December 23rd, he had seen 3 girls inside a pickup truck with a security guard he did not recognize. The girls, according to this man, had not appeared to be in distress. They had been laughing. The retired officer's account was added to the case file. The unidentified security guard was never traced. The case remains open. The remains of the 3 girls have never been found. The 17-year-old's brother, the 11-year-old who had been jealous about the trip to the mall, grew up to spend most of his adult life looking for his sister. He raised money for searches. He convinced volunteer dive teams to search Benbrook Lake, 8 miles from the mall. The dive teams pulled 3 submerged cars out of the lake in 2018 and 2019. None of the cars were connected to the case. He attended every annual press conference. He maintained the Facebook page that bore his sister's name. In 2024, on the 50th anniversary, he gave an interview to a Dallas television station in which he said he would keep looking for his sister as long as he had breath in his body. He is now over 60. The 17-year-old, if she were alive, would be 68. The 14-year-old would be 65. The 9-year-old would be 60. There is no version of these girls being alive. They are gone, 40 miles or 200 miles from the place they parked. Buried, dumped, in a lake, in a field, somewhere outside of Houston in Texas where no one ever looked, somewhere inside the limits of Tarrant County in places that have been bulldozed for new construction since 1974. Their bodies are in the ground somewhere. The man who put them there is, statistically, also dead by now. He would have to have been an adult in 1974. He would be in his late 70s or 80s or 90s. He may have died in prison for some other crime. He may have died in his own bed of pneumonia. He may have died yesterday. The thing he did to those 3 girls is what he would have taken with him. What links the Fort Worth case to Cindy's case in Ventura, what links both of them to Mary's case in Atlanta, is not the geography or the time of day. It is the choreography of normalcy. In all 3 cases, whatever happened to the victim happened in such a way that any nearby witness either saw nothing or saw what looked like a normal interaction. The Mercury Comet was returned to its parking space at Lenox Square between morning rounds. The man kneeling beside Cindy's car looked like a father helping his daughter. The Christmas presents on the back seat of the Oldsmobile in the Sears upper lot looked like a normal pause in a normal shopping day. None of these scenes contained any visible warning. That is part of how the people who do these things choose where to do them. They choose the places where the warning will not exist until the family arrives at the lot at 5 in the morning or at 6 in the evening and stands looking at a car that should not have stayed where it was. By the middle of January in 1981, parking lot cameras were beginning to appear in some American shopping centers. Not yet at the Edison Mall in Fort Myers, Florida. The lot there was lit by sodium lamps and watched by no one. The connection to the previous cases is not obvious at first. The victim was a teenager. She was running an errand with her family. She was walking back to her car alone. But the way she vanished was different. She vanished while her own brother was deciding 2 minutes earlier whether or not to walk out to the car with her. Her brother chose to stay inside the mall. He has spent the rest of his life wondering what would have happened if he had walked out with her instead. The mall was the Edison Mall in Fort Myers, Florida. The store was a Woolworth's department store. The night was Friday, the 16th of January, 1981. The girl was 17 years old. Her name was Mary Opitz. She had brown hair and hazel eyes and a set of braces on her teeth that her mother had finally been able to afford after several years of saving. Mary had dropped out of 10th grade the previous year and was studying for her GED. She worked nights at a restaurant called Mariner's Inn in North Fort Myers. She was a saver. She had $300 in a passbook savings account and a plan to buy a van. She was redecorating her bedroom that month. On the evening of January 16th, Mary went to the Edison Mall with her mother and her older brother, Chris. They arrived around 6:30 in the evening. They walked through the mall together for a while. Mary bought a small bag of soft pretzels at a kiosk near the Woolworths. After about an hour of walking, Mary told her mother and brother that she was tired and was going to head back out to the car to wait for them. The car was a burgundy 1979 Chevrolet Camaro. It was parked in a well-lit area near the Woolworth's entrance. Chris said later that he had thought briefly about going with his sister, then decided to stay inside the mall a while longer to look at something that had caught his eye. Mary smiled at him and walked out alone. She was carrying her bag of pretzels in one hand and her shopping bag in the other. At 7:30 in the evening, Mary's mother walked out to the parking lot to find Mary in the car. The car was where they had parked it. Mary was not in the car. Sitting on the trunk lid of the Camaro in a small flat row were the bag of pretzels and the small shopping bag containing the few items Mary had bought during the evening. The trunk lid is the kind of place where a person would set down items they were carrying while they searched in their pocket for car keys. The mother walked around the car. She looked under the car. She walked back into the mall. She had been in the mall continuously for the past hour. She had not seen Mary since Mary had walked out at 6:30. Mary's mother shouted Mary's name in the mall. People stared at her. Her shouts brought a security guard. The Fort Myers police were called. By 8 in the evening, the parking lot was being searched by half the on-duty officers in Fort Myers. The bag of pretzels and the shopping bag were photographed in place on the trunk and collected as evidence. Mary's purse and her car keys were not on the trunk. They were not in the car. They were not anywhere the search officers could find. The officers initially classified Mary as a runaway, a teenager, a girl who had dropped out of high school. The early classification matched none of the actual facts of Mary's life. She had $300 in the bank she had been saving for over a year toward a specific purpose. She had not taken the money. She had not taken any extra clothes. She had been redecorating her bedroom. On the morning of the day she disappeared, she had been talking with her mother about which color she wanted for the new curtains. For the next 26 days, Fort Myers detectives treated Mary's case as a low-priority runaway investigation. They put her photograph on a bulletin in the police station. They sent her name to the Florida Missing Persons database. They did not search the wooded areas behind the Edison Mall. They did not canvass the Woolworths or the other stores in the mall to see if anyone had noticed a man following a teenage girl. They did not follow up with Mary's co-workers at Mariner's Inn or with her GED class. They did not ask her brother Chris what he could remember about the few minutes before Mary had walked out alone. On the 11th of February, 1981, a young woman named Mary Hare walked out of the Edison Mall on her way to pick up her mother from work. The second Mary was 18 years old. She had brown hair. She was a graduate of North Fort Myers High School, the same school Mary had attended before dropping out. She had worked occasionally at the same restaurant Mary worked at, Mariner's Inn, though the two of them had not been close. The two girls were the same height and the same general build. From a distance in the parking lot of the Edison Mall, they would have looked very similar. The second Mary reached her car. She got into it. She drove out of the lot. Several hours later, when her mother had not arrived home, the second Mary's family began to call the police. The second Mary's car was found later that night, parked in the same parking lot of the Edison Mall, in a different space than the one she had originally parked in. Her keys were in the ignition. Her purse was in the passenger seat. The second Mary was not in the car. At this point, the Fort Myers police understood, for the first time, what they had been investigating since the previous month. The cases were reclassified within 48 hours. Mary's photograph was moved from the bulletin board to the front of the file cabinet. The wooded areas behind the Edison Mall were searched. Mary was not found. The second Mary's body was found in June of 1981 in a remote, sandy field in Lehigh Acres, 15 miles from the Edison Mall. She was fully clothed. She had been dead for several months. The cause of death was a single stab wound to the back. There was no evidence at the scene that indicated who had killed her. Her body had been left in a place where it would eventually be found, but not soon. The killer had wanted her to be found, but he had not wanted her to be found early. Mary's body has never been found. Her brother Chris is now in his 60s. He has told local reporters in Fort Myers on multiple occasions that he stayed up for 3 days straight after his sister disappeared, going to every friend's house, every place she might have been, every store and restaurant in the area, asking the same questions over and over. He has told reporters he thinks about that decision in the mall every day, the decision to let his sister walk out alone, the decision to stay inside for a while longer. He has told reporters that if he had walked out with her, he believes she would still be alive. Maybe. Or maybe whoever was in the parking lot that night would have killed Chris too. Or maybe whoever was in the parking lot that night would have abandoned the attempt and waited for another night and another girl. We do not know. The man who took Mary, who almost certainly also took the second Mary 4 weeks later, has never been identified. There has been speculation over the years that the man was Christopher Wilder, the serial killer who would later become known for a string of abductions and murders of young women in Florida and across the United States in the early and middle 1980s. Christopher was active in Florida in 1981. The two Mary cases share characteristics with several of Christopher's later confirmed murders. Christopher was killed in a confrontation with a New Hampshire state trooper in April of 1984 before he could be linked definitively to either case. The Lee County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Homicide Unit continues to consider Christopher a suspect in both cases, but no definitive evidence has ever been developed. The pretzels on the trunk are what stay with me about Mary. Mary had reached the car. She had taken the bag of pretzels and the shopping bag out of her hands and placed them on the trunk to free her hands to fish in her purse for the keys. That is the action people perform when they are about to unlock their car door. The pretzels and the shopping bag are still where she set them down. The purse and the keys are gone. She got the keys out of the purse, took them in her hand, and never put them in the lock. The thing that happened to her happened in the seconds between her setting down the pretzels and her unlocking the door. She had been about to unlock her car, and then she had been gone, and the bag of pretzels had stayed on the trunk where she had put it because pretzels do not move on their own, and no one had taken them. I have driven through the parking lot of the Edison Mall, but I have not stopped my car at the spot where Mary's brother Chris stood the night his mother came back inside shouting her sister's name. I have not stopped because I do not need to stop. I know what the trunk looks like. I know what a bag of pretzels looks like. I know what an empty parking space looks like the morning after a teenage girl is gone. 6 years later, on a Wednesday night in March of 1987, in a small mall in Crystal City, Missouri, an 18-year-old high school senior named Diana Braungardt clocked out of her cashier shift at a Venture department store at exactly 2 minutes past 10 in the evening. Diana was wearing her work smock, bright turquoise pants, a short black coat, and brown loafers. She had told her co-workers she needed to get home early because she had a test the next day at Festus High School. She had walked out the front of the store toward the parking lot where her family's yellow 1982 Ford Escort was parked. The drive home was about 10 minutes. Her parents lived in a parsonage. Her father, a Methodist minister named Mervyn, was waiting for her to come home so they could talk about the Easter sermon he was preparing. At 10:30, Diana had not arrived. Her parents were not yet worried. They thought she might have stopped at a friend's house. By 11, her mother was beginning to worry. By 11:30, her father was driving to the Twin City Mall to look for her car. He arrived at the mall just after midnight. The yellow Ford Escort was in the parking lot. The car was locked. The keys were not visible in the ignition or anywhere else inside the cabin. Diana's purse was not in the car. Diana was not in the car. Mervyn walked back into the Venture, which was still open, and spoke to the night manager. The night manager confirmed that Diana had clocked out at 10:02. He had seen her himself. She had been in a hurry. He had said goodnight to her as she walked out of the employee break room toward the front entrance. The Venture's parking lot was, at that hour, almost empty. The Crystal City Police were called. Officers arrived at the mall around 12:40 in the morning of the 12th. The investigation that followed lasted decades. A witness emerged who had been pulling into the Venture parking lot around 10 in the evening, in a car with a baby in the back seat. She had stopped to change the baby's diaper. From her parked car, she had watched through her rear-view mirror as a young woman in a Venture smock emerged from the front of the store and was approached by a man on the sidewalk between the store and the lot. The man was white, in his early 20s, about 5'10", with brown or black hair and a medium build. The young woman had stopped walking and stood talking with him. The witness finished changing the baby and pulled out before she could see what happened next. She had not thought anything of it at the time. She only remembered the conversation a week later when she saw Diana's photograph on the front page of the local newspaper. A police sketch was made of the man the witness had described. The sketch was published in the local papers and shown on local television. No one ever identified the man. Detectives worked with the sketch for years. They interviewed every man in Festus who matched the description and had any criminal record. They considered, at one point in 2007, a local man whose appearance closely matched the sketch. The man was at the time of his interview already incarcerated on unrelated charges. He had no alibi for the night of March 11, 1987. He could not be cleared. He also could not be charged. There was no physical evidence linking him to Diana. He died in prison in approximately 2015 of natural causes on the unrelated sentence. Whether he was the man in the sketch, the Crystal City Police have never said publicly. Diana's parents are still alive. Her father is now in his 90s. Her mother is in her late 80s. They have been waiting for 39 years. They had 4 children. Diana was the second. Her older brother is the only surviving sibling. The two of them have visited the Twin City Mall over the years, although the Venture department store closed long ago and the building was eventually demolished. The mall is now an outdoor strip plaza. The location where the yellow Ford Escort sat for 2.5 hours, locked with its keys missing and its driver not coming home, is now the parking lot of a discount tire shop. People park there to get oil changes. They walk past the spot where Diana did not reach her own car, and they do not know what they are walking past. What did the man on the sidewalk say to her in the seconds before her family started to worry? What did Diana answer? Why did she stop walking? I asked Marvin once whether the death of the person of interest in approximately 2015 had given him any sense of ending. Marvin said no. He had spent his life as a minister talking to families about loss, about the closing of doors. He said his daughter's door has never closed. He could feel the air still moving through it. He did not say this in any superstitious sense. He meant it as a fact. Until he knew what had happened to Diana, the door was still open. He did not expect it to close in his own lifetime. He thought it might never close at all. Move forward 7 years. Move slightly south, into Arkansas. Move from a Methodist parsonage in a small town in Missouri to a small farmhouse outside Searcy, where a 20-year-old man named Jarrod Green lived with his father, an unemployed welder named David. Jarrod had graduated from Searcy High School in 1993. He had been a baseball player. His teammates remembered him as the kind of kid whose laughter you could hear across 2 practice fields. He had started at Arkansas State University BB in the fall of 1993. He had not finished his first semester. He had instead found methamphetamine, or methamphetamine had found him, through a network of high school friends who had been moving small quantities of it through White County for several years. Jarrod's drug use had escalated quickly. By the late summer of 1994, he was using daily. He was buying from a former classmate named Brandon Wheeler. He had run up a debt of $7,500. Brandon had grown up in Searcy. He had been in Jarrod's high school graduating class. He had not gone to college. He had moved methamphetamine in increasing quantities throughout his late teens and early 20s. He lived with a roommate named Robert Webb in a rented house in Judsonia, Arkansas, about 15 minutes from Searcy. The rented house was a center of the local drug economy. People came in and out of it at all hours. Brandon and Robert were known, by their customers and by their few friends, to carry handguns at all times. Jarrod had a .38 caliber Rossi revolver that he had purchased used from a gun store in Pine Bluff. He kept it in the glove box of his pickup truck, a green 1980-something Chevrolet C10, the year of which I will not specify because it is not in the public record. On the afternoon of September 30th, 1994, Jarrod called a friend named Travis. Travis is not the friend's real name. The friend has asked, through Jarrod's family, that his identity be kept private because he still lives in Searcy. Travis met Jarrod that afternoon at the country club parking lot in Searcy. Jarrod asked Travis to give him back the Rossi revolver, which Travis had been keeping in the trunk of his car wrapped in a t-shirt. Travis gave it back. He asked Jarrod why he wanted it. Jarrod said he was about to meet Brandon about the drug debt. He said he was scared. He wanted the revolver in his pocket when he saw Brandon, just in case. Travis told Jarrod the smartest move would be not to meet Brandon at all. He said his mother could lend Jarrod some money if it would help pay down the debt. Jarrod said he had to settle this himself. He took the revolver, put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, got into his green Chevrolet C10, and drove away. That was the last time Travis saw Jarrod alive. Travis has told the story several times over the past 3 decades to investigators and to a podcast, and he has repeated it to me in a brief phone conversation in the spring of 2024. He has not changed any detail of it. He has said, without crying, but without hiding the fact that he might cry, that he should have driven with Jarrod to whatever Jarrod was driving to, that he should have made it impossible for the meeting with Brandon to happen, that he was 20 years old and stupid and high himself in October of 1994, and that he did not understand what was about to happen, and that if he had understood, he would have driven anywhere with Jarrod, anywhere at all, just to keep him out of the room with Brandon. But Travis did not. Travis went home and slept. The next morning, Jarrod's father David went out to feed the dog and noticed Jarrod's truck was not in the driveway. This was not unusual. Jarrod often did not come home. David waited a day. By October 2nd, with no word, he started to get worried. By October 4th, he was driving around Searcy looking for the Chevrolet C10. He found it on the morning of October 5th in the parking lot of the Walmart Supercenter on East Race Avenue, parked in a row near the back of the lot. The truck was unlocked. The windows were rolled all the way down. The keys were on the floorboard of the driver's side. The Rossi revolver was not in the glove box. The inside of the cab smelled like Jarrod's cologne. The truck had been in the lot through the busiest Friday and Saturday of the autumn so far. The Walmart employees on cart duty had walked past it dozens of times during the previous 5 days. No one had connected it to anything. David called the Searcy police on the afternoon of October 5th. He told them about the drug debt to Brandon. They did not, in October of 1994, treat the case with the urgency the family thought it deserved. The case sat in a folder on a desk for 10 months. In July of 1995, a man named Charles Langley walked into the Searcy Police Department and told a detective something he had heard. Langley said that in late 1994, before Jarrod had disappeared, Brandon and Robert Webb had come to his house and asked if he wanted to make $1,000 helping them get rid of someone. He had refused. Several weeks later, after Jarrod was reported missing, Brandon and Robert had come back and told him the someone had been taken out of the picture, that the body needed to be disposed of. He had refused again. Langley was not a credible witness in any conventional sense. He was a heavy methamphetamine user. He had a long arrest record. He had been in and out of jail for a decade. The detective took his statement. The statement sat in the folder for several years. In 2000, Officer Charles Perry of the Searcy Police interviewed Langley while Langley was in the St. Francis County Jail. Langley, by this time, was facing a long prison sentence on unrelated charges. Langley recanted his 1995 statement. He said he had made up most of it. He said he had not actually known Brandon and Robert in late 1994. He said he had hoped that the statement might help him with his current sentencing. Officer Perry wrote up the recantation and put it in the file. The case went cold again. For the next 16 years, the case sat in the cold case files of the Searcy Police Department. Brandon moved out of Arkansas. He moved through several states and ended up in Jefferson County, Ohio, where he lived in a trailer park off Two Bridges Road and worked occasional construction jobs. He was 41 years old by 2017. He had not, by all available accounts, been involved in the drug trade for many years. He had become a quiet man with a small life. He had not been a topic of conversation in Searcy for a long time. In late 2016, the cold case was reopened by Detectives Sexton, Kidder, and Darnell of the Searcy Police Department. They had developed new leads from a confidential informant. The informant told them that he believed Jarrod's body had been disposed of on a 300-acre property in White County belonging to a family named Stafford. In December of 2016, the property was searched by cadaver dogs. The dogs hit on a spot near a deer stand. A pond on the property was drained. No human remains were recovered, but the dogs had hit. The detectives, on the basis of the dog reaction and the new informant testimony, submitted a probable cause affidavit to White County Prosecutor Becky McCoy. McCoy authorized the arrest. On May 10, 2017, Brandon was arrested in his trailer park in Ohio by Searcy Police and the United States Marshals Service Mountain State Fugitive Task Force. He was extradited to Arkansas. He was charged with capital murder and abuse of a corpse. 6 months later, in November of 2017, the prosecution dropped the charges. The order was signed by Circuit Judge Robert Edwards. McCoy explained the decision to the press by saying the evidence the prosecution had expected to develop in time for the jury trial had not in fact been developed. The decision to drop charges was technical. It was not an exoneration. Brandon walked out of the Saline County Jail a free man and returned to Ohio. He filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the Searcy Police Department. The Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals in 2021 affirmed a lower court ruling that the affidavit submitted by the detectives had not supported a finding of probable cause. Brandon is now, legally, a man who was wrongfully arrested for a murder that the state of Arkansas could not prove had occurred at all. He is a free man with no criminal liability for whatever happened to Jarrod. He has not given any further public interviews. But Jarrod has been gone for 32 years. The truck is gone. The revolver is gone. The body is gone. The family knows what they know, and they cannot prove what they know, which is the worst position a family in this kind of case can ever occupy. Jarrod's father David died in approximately 2015, before the arrest, before the dropped charges, before the federal lawsuit. He died believing that the man he held responsible for his son's death would never face consequences. He was right. He has been right for 32 years. He is still right. The Walmart Supercenter on East Race Avenue in Searcy is still there. The parking lot in which the green Chevrolet C10 sat for 5 days in October of 1994 has been resurfaced twice since then. The space is, in coordinates, in approximately the third row from the entrance, 6 spaces over from the fire lane. I do not know which space exactly. The truck was retrieved by the family before the police could have it forensically processed, because the family did not realize at the time that they should have left it where it was. They drove it home. By the time the Searcy police thought to ask about evidence, the truck had been driven, sat upon, leaned upon, and otherwise contaminated for several weeks. There was, by then, nothing in the truck that the lab could use. The keys on the floorboard had been picked up by David. The windows had been rolled up. The smell of cologne had faded. I want to pause here, between cases, and tell you about a phone call. Last summer, in the middle of working on this investigation, I called Jarrod's sister, whose name I will keep private. I asked her what she remembered most about the days right after her father had found the truck in the Walmart lot. She said her father, who had been a man not given to crying, had come back from the police station that first afternoon and sat at the kitchen table for over an hour without saying anything. Eventually, her mother asked him what he was thinking. Her father said he was thinking about the windows on the truck. The windows had been rolled all the way down. It had been raining the day before. The inside of the cab should have been wet, but the cab had been dry. He had touched the seats, and they had been dry. Whoever rolled the windows down had rolled them down after the rain stopped. Whoever rolled the windows down had wanted them to be down when David found the truck. The windows had been an arrangement, a signal, a way of telling the family, without saying anything, that whoever had been in the truck last had wanted David to know what he had done. That is the case of Jarrod. The man sitting at the kitchen table understood it before the police did. He understood it before the lawyers did. He understood it before the Eighth Circuit did. He took it to his grave. 6 months after Jarrod was last seen, on the other side of the country, a 17-year-old high school dropout in Carmel, New York, borrowed her mother's red Oldsmobile to drive to a shopping plaza less than a mile from home. Her name was Robin Murphy. She was tall, almost 5'10", with brown hair that she had recently dyed black. She wore mostly black clothes. She listened to rock music. She wrote in a journal. She had quit school the year before to take a job at a ShopRite supermarket inside the ShopRite Plaza shopping center on Route 52. On the evening of April 9, 1995, she planned to leave the car at the plaza and walk to a restaurant to meet her boyfriend Matt for dinner. Robin parked the Oldsmobile in the plaza lot near a Burger King restaurant at around 7 in the evening. She walked across the front of the plaza. She went into a laundromat that was located in the same shopping center on the eastern end. She knew the man who worked at the laundromat. His name was Howard Gombert. He was in his early 30s. Robin had described him to a friend of hers, 2 months earlier, as a person she did not entirely like but who had been kind to her. She had said he was friends with several of the older girls who hung out at the Burger King. She had said she sometimes went into the laundromat just to talk to him when she did not feel like being at home. On April 9th, Robin spoke with Howard for several minutes inside the laundromat. The conversation was witnessed by another customer, who later described it to police as casual and friendly. Howard later told police that he and Robin had been talking about whether he should break up with his current girlfriend. Robin had advised him to think it through carefully. Robin had then said goodnight and left the laundromat. The time was around 7:30 in the evening. The walk from the laundromat to the restaurant where Robin was meeting Matt was approximately 10 minutes. Matt waited at the restaurant for an hour. Robin did not arrive. Matt called Robin's house at around 9. Robin's mother said Robin had borrowed the car at 6:30. Matt drove to the plaza at around 10. He found the red Oldsmobile parked exactly where Robin had said she was going to leave it. He looked in the windows. The car was empty. He drove home. He called the police. For 3 days, the Carmel police treated Robin's case as a probable runaway. Robin was a teenager. She had dropped out of high school. She had a complicated relationship with her parents. The most likely explanation, in the early stages of the investigation, was that Robin had walked out of the laundromat, walked to the bus station, and gotten on a bus to somewhere else. On the 3rd day after Robin's disappearance, a Carmel police officer doing a foot search of the area behind the shopping center found Robin's purse, her wallet, her keys, and her checkbook lying in a marshy area of grass and weeds about 30 yards behind the back of the strip mall. The items had been tossed into the brush. The wallet still contained Robin's identification, a small amount of cash, and a photograph of Matt. The checkbook still had checks in it. The keys included the key to the Oldsmobile. Whoever had thrown them into the brush had not been after the money or the car. They had been after Robin. The personal effects had been discarded because the person who had taken Robin had not wanted to be found with them in his possession. For the next 5 years, the Carmel Police, the New York State Police, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation worked the case as an abduction. They interviewed everyone in the plaza who had been present that evening. They interviewed Howard at the laundromat. Howard admitted he had been the last person to speak with Robin. He admitted he had attempted to commit suicide several days after her disappearance and had been hospitalized. He gave no information that helped the investigation. He had a previous arrest from 1991 for first-degree rape of a 13-year-old girl, which had been dismissed when the alleged victim recanted shortly after the arrest. The Carmel police continued to interview him over the years. He continued to deny any involvement. In March of 2000, Howard was arrested in Connecticut for raping a woman he had been living with. During the search of his belongings at the time of his arrest, the Connecticut police found a pair of women's underwear in his suitcase. The underwear was tested for DNA. The DNA came back as Robin's. Howard was sentenced to 30 years in Connecticut State Prison for the rape of his live-in girlfriend. He has, as far as I have been able to confirm, been continuously incarcerated since. The presence of Robin's underwear in Howard's suitcase has never been explained by Howard in any way that makes sense to anyone except Howard. He has said over the years that he sometimes collected clothing left behind by customers at the laundromat where he worked, sorted it, washed it, and donated it to charity. The presence of Robin's specific underwear in his specific suitcase, 5 years after her disappearance, in a state where she had never lived, in a context unrelated to a laundromat where he had not worked in years, has not been addressed by Howard in any way that amounts to a denial of having been involved in her disappearance. He has not been charged in connection with her case. A second man named Anthony DePipo, who is currently serving a life sentence for the unrelated 1994 murder of an 11-year-old girl in Putnam County, New York, has alleged from prison that Howard is responsible for that 1994 murder and is also responsible for Robin's disappearance. Anthony's claims are difficult to evaluate. He has every motive to shift blame for the murder he is currently convicted of onto someone else. But the underwear in the suitcase is not a claim. The underwear is an object. The object was found in the possession of Howard by the Connecticut State Police in March of 2000. The object belonged to a young woman who had disappeared in the parking lot of a shopping center where Howard had been the last person to speak with her. Robin's mother has waited 31 years. She is in her 70s now. She has told the Carmel police on multiple occasions that she does not understand why Howard has not been charged. The Carmel police have explained also on multiple occasions that they cannot charge him without a body, without a more direct piece of evidence linking him to the disappearance itself, without something that connects the underwear in the suitcase to what happened on April 9, 1995. The underwear by itself is not enough. There needs to be a body, there needs to be a witness, there needs to be a chain of custody for the events of that night that the prosecution can stand in front of a jury and defend. The body has never been found. Searches in 2024 of an unidentified set of remains in Putnam County briefly raised hopes among Robin's family that the bones might be hers. The bones turned out to be those of a different woman, a woman named Karen who had disappeared in 1980. Karen's family received their answer. Robin's family did not. What I want you to take away from Robin's case is the rotation of the perimeter. The men in this pattern are not lurking. They are present. They are part of the daily geography of the place. They are someone the victim already knows, or someone the victim has reason to trust, or someone the victim has a small problem and they have offered to help solve it. The danger is not the man hiding behind a car. The danger is the man behind the cash register, the man kneeling at the tire, the man in the laundromat, the man on the sidewalk between the store and the lot, the man you have already nodded to on your way in. Now move forward 4 years, from a teenage girl walking to a restaurant in New York to a 52-year-old first-grade teacher running an errand in California, from a stranger at a laundromat to a husband of 34 years, from a missing girl whose underwear surfaced in a suitcase 5 years later to a missing wife whose body has never surfaced anywhere. The pattern does not need a stranger. The pattern does not need a public lot. The pattern needs only the lot and the absence and the family that will never be told. Her name was Sandra Kerby. She had taught at Gibson Elementary School in Fresno for 18 years. Her students adored her. Their parents adored her. Her colleagues adored her. She had been at the school long enough that she had started teaching the children of children she had taught earlier in her career. She was, according to the colleagues I have spoken with over the years, the kind of teacher who remembered every student's birthday, who decorated her classroom with hand-drawn signs, who answered emails from parents within hours. Sandra was married to a man named Frank Kerby. Frank was 54. He was a teacher at a continuation high school in the nearby town of Carmel. Before that, he had been a football coach and athletic director at Carmel High School. He was a well-known figure in Central Valley High School sports. He refereed college wrestling matches on the weekends. He played golf with the same group of men he had played with for 20 years. Their daughters Michelle and Jamie were both adults. Michelle was a teacher herself. Jamie lived in a house in the Woodward Park neighborhood of North Fresno, near the River Park Shopping Center. On the morning of July 10, 1999, Sandra was at Jamie's house in Woodward Park. She had stopped by to drop off something. At 11:30 in the morning, she said goodbye to Jamie and her grandchildren and walked out to her car, a white 1993 Ford Explorer. She told Jamie she was going to do a little shopping before heading home. She drove away from the house. She did not arrive home. Frank reported her missing at 12:15 in the morning the next day, July 11th, 12 hours and 45 minutes after she had left Jamie's. 4 days later, on July 14th, a co-worker of Sandra's, who was helping the family search for the missing teacher, found the white Ford Explorer parked in a row of cars in front of the Target store at the River Park Shopping Center, 2.5 miles from Jamie's house. The car was locked. The keys were inside the car, lying on the driver's seat. Sandra's purse was on the floor of the passenger side. Sandra's wallet was inside the purse, with all of her credit cards, her cash, and her identification. The driver's seat was, when the car was found, in a position that did not match Sandra's height. The seat had been pushed back. Sandra was about 5'4". The seat had been adjusted for someone closer to 6 feet. Whoever had been the last person to drive the Explorer had not been Sandra. The Fresno Police Department began an immediate investigation. Within several days, the focus of the investigation had shifted from the question of where Sandra was to the question of where Frank had been on the morning of July 10th. Frank had told the police that he had been in Fresno that day. Cell phone records, however, showed that a phone call had been made from Frank's mobile phone in the late morning of July 10th from a cell tower in Reedley, California, more than 30 miles from where Frank claimed to have been. Frank could not explain the discrepancy. He stopped cooperating with the investigation shortly after this conversation. He retained an attorney. He declined to take a polygraph test, citing medical reasons. The same week that Frank stopped cooperating, a 31-year-old woman in Kerman called the Kerman Police Department to report that Frank had been harassing her by telephone. She said she had been having an ongoing affair with Frank for the past year. Frank had been telling her he was divorced. Frank had recently proposed to her. The proposal had occurred days after Sandra's disappearance, before Sandra had even been reported missing. The woman would, several weeks later, decline to pursue charges of harassment. But her statement remained in the file. The Fresno police obtained search warrants for the home in January of 2000. Among the seized items was Sandra's diary. The entries made clear that Sandra knew about the affair. In February of 2000, the case was formally reclassified as a homicide. They did not formally name Frank as a suspect. They informally communicated to Sandra's family that he was a person of interest. 26 years later, in 2025, the Fresno police told a local television station that Frank remained a person of interest. They had not arrested him. They had not charged him. Frank himself was, at the time of the most recent reporting, in his 80s, living alone in the same house in the Woodward Park area he had shared with Sandra. When a CBS reporter knocked on his door in early 2025, he came to the screen but did not open it. He told the reporter he had nothing to say about his wife. He told the reporter the matter had been put behind him by his grandchildren and himself. He told the reporter the case had been proven, although he did not specify what had been proven. The reporter pushed for more. Frank closed the door. There is no version of Sandra's case that resolves itself happily. There is also no version of it in which Frank is convicted before he dies. He will outlive the investigation. He will go to his grave a free man with grandchildren who do not know what their grandmother's last morning looked like. The grandchildren will hear, eventually, the things their grandmother's mother and sister said about Frank in the years after July of 1999. They will hear about the cell tower in Reedley. They will hear about the affair with the woman in Kerman. They will hear about the proposal that came days after Sandra had not come home from a shopping trip to a Target. But they will not hear what happened in the white Ford Explorer between 11:30 in the morning and the moment, hours later, when someone 6 feet tall pushed the driver's seat back and parked the car in a row in front of the Target. They will not hear what was done to Sandra. They will not hear where her body was placed. Those facts are inside the head of the man behind the screen door, the man who told the CBS reporter he had nothing to say. He has had 27 years to say something. He has not said it. He may never say it. He may take it with him. What strikes me about Sandra's case, when I sit with it long enough, is the difference between this kind of disappearance and the previous 6. In the previous 6 cases, the man who took the victim was a stranger to the victim, or someone known only loosely. In Sandra's case, if the police's working theory is correct, the man who took her was the man she had been married to for 34 years, the man she had built a life with. The man whose grandchildren were in the next room when she had stopped by Jamie's house that morning. The man who, that same morning or that previous evening, had decided to make a phone call that would put him in Reedley, California, while his wife was driving toward a Target in Fresno, where her car would later be parked by someone roughly his height. The man who, 3 days later, would propose marriage to a woman who had been waiting for him to be free. The parking lot at the River Park Shopping Center is not where Sandra was killed. It is where her car was abandoned by whoever killed her. The lot was a place to leave a vehicle. He chose River Park. He chose the row in front of the Target. He chose to lock the car and leave the keys inside on the driver's seat. He arranged the scene of his wife's car, after killing her, in a manner meant to look like she had simply walked away from it. The arrangement slowed down the investigation by several days, while the Fresno police initially considered the possibility that Sandra had voluntarily abandoned her car. By the time the investigation focused on Frank, several days had passed. Whatever evidence might have been captured at the actual scene of Sandra's death was no longer accessible. The lot was the public face of the disappearance. The lot is not where it happened, but the lot is what you can see today if you drive to the River Park Shopping Center in North Fresno. The Target is still there. The row in front of the Target is still where it was. I drove out to that row in March of last year. I parked in the approximate space where the Ford Explorer had been left. The space backs onto a planted strip of palm trees. From the driver's seat, I could see the Target entrance, the cart corral, and the corner where Sandra would have walked past on her way in, if she had ever walked in. I sat in my car for about 10 minutes. People came and went around me. None of them looked at the space. None of them knew. The Fresno police later asked Frank why he had not gone to the Target lot to see the car. Frank said he had not wanted to see it. He said this in the same tone of voice he used when he answered the door for the CBS reporter in 2025. The tone of a man who had decided, a quarter-century earlier, what he was and was not going to acknowledge. The fact that any of these cases involves a husband or a boyfriend or a stranger or a coworker or a man at a laundromat does not change what happens inside the parking lot. The parking lot is where the residue of these cases sits. The car, the purse, the keys, the seat pushed back, the pretzels on the trunk, the locked vehicle the family cannot bring themselves to drive. The parking lot is not the crime. The parking lot is the shape of the crime, the negative space where the victim used to be, the visible evidence of what cannot be put back. The parking lot is what the takers always leave us. It is the only thing they let us keep. Move forward 18 months, December 2nd, 2000, Everett, Washington. A 50-year-old social worker named Sharon Anderson, who went by Sherry, kissed her husband John goodbye at 9 in the morning and drove from their home in Stanwood, Washington to the Everett Mall, about 30 miles south. Sherry was Cherokee on her mother's side and white on her father's side. She had worked for the Department of Social and Health Services for over a decade, helping welfare recipients move toward employment. Her colleagues described her as no-nonsense, focused, and genuinely committed to her clients. She rode a Harley-Davidson on weekends. She wore a customized wedding ring with a diamond flanked by 2 black onyx stones in a white gold setting. The ring had been designed by her and John. Sherry had told John that morning she was going to do a few errands. Christmas shopping, drop film off to be developed, stop at a McDonald's for breakfast. She would be home by 4:30. They had plans to drive to Seattle that evening for a motorcycle show. John had taken a nap in the early afternoon. He had woken up at 5:30. He had not been worried immediately. Sherry was a careful driver. By 7, with no call, he had started to worry. By 8, he had called Sherry's friends. None of them had heard from her. By 10, Sherry's best friend Mary had driven to the Everett Mall to look for the truck. She found it in a row of cars in front of the Mervyn's department store on the south side of the mall. The truck was locked. Looking through the windows, she could see Sherry's cell phone on the passenger seat. She could see the holster of the small handgun Sherry carried for protection. She could not see any shopping bags. She could not see any wrapped Christmas gifts. There was nothing inside the truck that suggested Sherry had spent any time at the mall doing the errands she had planned to do. Mary called John. John drove to the mall. They waited together for the Snohomish County Sheriff's deputies. The deputies arrived around 11. They confirmed that the truck was registered to Sherry. They photographed the truck. They opened it with a Slim Jim. They confirmed that the cell phone was Sherry's. They confirmed that the handgun was where the holster suggested. The handgun was loaded. The truck was clean. Cleaner, John thought, than it had been when she left that morning. John was familiar with how Sherry kept her truck. She was not a meticulous person about car interiors. She left coffee cups, work files, sometimes a jacket. The truck on the night of December 2nd was, John thought, oddly tidy, wiped down, almost like someone had cleaned it before parking it. The investigation that followed lasted 26 years and counting. The Everett Police Department, which assumed jurisdiction from the sheriff's office, treated the case as a missing persons investigation throughout. They have never officially classified it as a homicide. They have also never officially closed it. The case has appeared, periodically, in Snohomish County's unsolved cases playing card decks distributed to inmates. It is the 8 of clubs. Tips received over the years have been few. None have led to anything. Sherry's bank accounts have remained inactive since the morning of December 2nd, 2000. Her credit cards have not been used. Her social security number has not been used. Her custom wedding ring, which would have been pawned within hours by anyone interested in the value of the metal and stones, has not surfaced in any pawn shop database in any state. A year after Sherry disappeared, John filed for divorce. He told friends he could not continue to be married to a woman who, legally, was not yet dead. He needed to move forward. He needed to handle his own affairs. The divorce was processed without contest because there was no one to contest it. Sherry's friend Mary, who had found the truck, has continued to advocate for the case for 2 decades. She has made sure Sherry's photograph appears regularly in local media. She has spoken at every anniversary press event. She has not given up. She has told reporters that she still half expects to look up someday and see Sherry walking toward her. She has told reporters that the worst part is not the absence. The worst part, she has said, is the cleanness of the truck, the thoroughness of whatever happened that day. Whoever took Sherry, Mary has said, took the time to wipe down the truck. Whoever took Sherry, Mary has said, was not a stranger doing it for the first time. Whoever took Sherry knew what to do. What I want you to notice about the Sherry case is the parking space itself. The truck was found in front of a Mervyn's. Sherry had shopped at the Everett Mall Mervyn's regularly. She would have parked in front of the Mervyn's habitually. Whoever moved the truck to that location after Sherry was no longer driving it knew Sherry well enough to know where she would have parked. The killer was telling Sherry's family, with the placement of the truck, that he was someone who knew her. He had been someone she trusted enough to allow into her own truck. The parking space was a signature. It was where Sherry would have parked. It was not where her body was. Like Sandra's case, the lot was the staging. The lot was the part the killer wanted us to see. Now move further south into Texas. Move from Pacific Northwest cold and rain to East Texas summer humidity. Move from a Mervyn's parking lot to the side of Interstate 20 between Longview and Kilgore. The next case is one of the few in this investigation in which the victim's car was not found in the lot of the store she had visited. The victim had visited a nightclub, not a department store. Her car was found, days after her disappearance, abandoned on the shoulder of an interstate highway 30 miles from the club. But the seat of the car had been pushed back to a position that made it impossible for the victim to have been the last person to drive it. And the parking lot of the nightclub, which is where she had walked out into the night for the last time anyone in Texas saw her, is where this case begins. Her name was Brandi Wells. She was 23 years old. She was 5 feet tall, with brown hair and brown eyes. She had been called Blinky since childhood because of a habit of blinking quickly when she was nervous or excited. She lived with her mother in Tyler, Texas, an hour west of Longview. She wanted to be a country singer. She had also said, more recently, that she might want to be an elementary school teacher. She was working a series of part-time jobs while she figured out which dream she was going to pursue. On the night of August 2nd, 2006, Brandi came home from work, changed into a dark floral tube top, rust-colored pants, and black strapless high-heeled sandals, and told her mother Ellen that she was going to a club with friends. Brandi did not specify which club. She borrowed her own car, a black 2000 Pontiac Grand Prix coupe. The coupe had a slight dent above the front passenger wheel from a previous minor accident. Brandi drove first to a local bowling alley in Tyler, where the bartender was a family friend. She had a single drink, charged it to her mother's tab. She told the bartender she was driving 45 minutes east to Longview, alone, to a club called Graham Central Station. The bartender, who was older, tried to talk her out of it. Driving alone, late at night, to a place she had never been. The bartender told Brandi it was not safe. Brandi laughed. She said she would be fine. She left the bowling alley and drove east on Interstate 20 toward Longview. Brandi arrived at Graham Central Station on McCann Road in Longview at 10:30 in the evening. The club's surveillance camera caught her checking in at the front counter at 10:36. After that, Brandi was inside the club for nearly 2 hours. Several patrons later told police she had been asking other people in the club for money. She wanted gas money. Her tank had been close to empty when she arrived. A man approached her at one point and offered to buy her a drink. She declined. She asked instead if he could spare $20 for gas. He said no, but he gave her his name and number on a napkin and told her to call if she needed help. The napkin was later found in her car. The man was located by police, interviewed at length, and cleared. He had remained inside the club until 1 in the morning. At 12:30 in the morning of August 3, 2006, the club's exterior camera caught Brandi walking out alone. She walked toward the parking lot. She was sober. She had been sober when she arrived, and she had been sober all evening, drinking only water inside the club because she had no money for drinks. She walked off the camera frame. She did not come back into the camera frame. She did not go back inside the club. She did not call for help. The black Pontiac Grand Prix was not, at the moment Brandi walked off frame, visible from the camera's position. At 9 in the morning, a Texas highway patrolman driving westbound on Interstate 20 found a black Pontiac Grand Prix abandoned on the right shoulder, 300 yards west of the FM 2087 exit. The car was empty. The patrolman ran the plates. The car was not reported stolen. The patrolman tagged it as an abandoned vehicle and continued his patrol. He drove back past it twice that morning. The car was still there. By midday, Brandi's mother, Ellen, had begun calling Brandi's friends. By the late afternoon, having received no information, Ellen was making calls to police departments in both Tyler and Longview. But the patrolman who had tagged the car had ended his shift, and the car had not been connected to Brandi. The car would sit on the shoulder of Interstate 20 for 5 days before someone made the connection. It was a passerby on August 6th who finally called the Longview police to report that the black Pontiac Grand Prix had been sitting on the shoulder for 5 days. Officers responded. They ran the plates. They contacted Tyler. By that afternoon, the connection was made between the abandoned car and the missing woman. Detectives arrived at the scene. They opened the car. They found Brandi's purse on the seat with her wallet and her identification. They found a non-functional cellular phone that was later identified as belonging to Brandi's deployed ex-boyfriend. The phone had no service and could not have been used. They found a plastic gas can in the trunk. The gas tank was empty, and the driver's seat was pushed all the way back in a position appropriate for a man at least 6 feet tall. Brandi was 5 feet tall. The Longview police investigation tried to identify the man who had been the last person to drive the Pontiac. Cell phone records eventually showed that Brandi's cell phone had been used after her disappearance. The phone had pinged off cell towers along Interstate 20, then north into Oklahoma, then west into the Texas Panhandle. The phone had eventually gone offline. The record suggested that whoever had Brandi's phone had been moving rapidly, possibly with Brandi, possibly with her body, in the days after the disappearance. 3 men were eventually identified through the phone records. 2 were eliminated. 1 failed a polygraph test. None of the 3 were ever charged. The polygraph result alone was not sufficient. The Longview police kept the file open. The file is still open as of the most recent reporting in 2025. Brandi's body has never been found. The bartender at the Tyler bowling alley, the one who had tried to talk her out of going to Longview, has spoken at multiple anniversaries about her regret. She has said she should have been more forceful. She should have refused to let Brandi leave. She has said she still thinks, almost 20 years later, about the moment Brandi walked out of the bowling alley laughing. The driver's seat is what stays with me about Brandi's case. A woman drove from Tyler to Longview alone in her own car, parked it at a club, walked off camera, and was never seen again by anyone known to her family. Her car ended up 30 miles west of the club, on the shoulder of an interstate highway, with her purse inside, her phone replacement inside, and a gas can in the trunk. The driver's seat was in a position no 5-foot woman could have driven from. Whoever had been driving the car last was not Brandi. The car was not abandoned by Brandi. The car was abandoned by whoever had taken Brandi out of the parking lot of Graham Central Station, driven her in her own car for some distance, and then either continued on without the car, or was picked up by a second person in a second vehicle, or some other arrangement we do not understand. The car was a message. The seat pushed back was the punctuation of the message. Whoever had pushed the seat back had wanted the police to know that Brandi was no longer in control of her own vehicle. He could have adjusted the seat back to where Brandi would have had it. He did not. He left the seat where his own body had set it. He wanted us to see his height. He wanted us to know. Move now to a Walmart supercenter on Cobb Parkway in Marietta, Georgia, in the early morning hours of September 13, 2013. The case I am about to describe is, in some ways, the simplest in this investigation. There is no question about who took the victim. There is no question about the geography. The victim ran out of the front of a Walmart at 2 in the morning, abandoning her shoes, her purse, her phone, and her wallet. She ran into a parking lot full of cars. She did not come back. She has not been seen since. Her name was Tiffany Whitton. She was 26 years old. She was 5 feet 3 inches tall. She weighed about 105 pounds. She had blonde hair. She had Chinese characters tattooed on her left wrist, a tattoo on her back, and a tattoo on her right shoulder blade. She had a 6-year-old daughter who lived with relatives. Tiffany herself had been living in a house in Powder Springs, Georgia, with her boyfriend Ashley Caudle, known as Red, and Red's daughter from another relationship, and several other adults associated with Red's network of friends. The house was a center of methamphetamine use. Tiffany was high almost continuously in the months leading up to her disappearance. She had been arrested in March of 2011 on home invasion charges in Dalton, Georgia. She had a history of drug offenses. She had, before everything went bad, wanted to be a veterinarian. She had been a smart kid. She had been a good student. The drugs had taken everything else from her by the time she was 26. On the night of September 12, 2013, Tiffany and Red had gone to the house of a friend named Steven and used drugs together for several hours. Around midnight, Tiffany and Red borrowed a friend's pickup truck and drove to the Walmart Supercenter on Cobb Parkway in Marietta, near a restaurant where Tiffany had worked years earlier. They arrived at 1 in the morning. They went inside the store. They walked the aisles for nearly an hour. The store's loss prevention officers were watching them on closed-circuit television the entire time. Tiffany was visibly high. She was constantly in motion. She was picking up items, putting them down, walking back to them, picking them up again. She was, the loss prevention officers later told police, behaving in a manner consistent with someone who was actively planning to shoplift. She had shoplifted from that same Walmart on previous occasions, and her face was known to the loss prevention staff. At about 2 in the morning, Tiffany and Red went to the front of the store. Red made a small purchase at the checkout. He paid for some clothing for his daughter and a portable speaker. As they walked out the front exit, the loss prevention officers stopped Tiffany. They asked her to come back inside. They believed she was concealing items she had not paid for. The cost of the suspected shoplifted goods was approximately $20. Tiffany, in the moment the officers stopped her, did something that no rational person without a serious problem would do. She dropped her purse on the floor of the entrance vestibule. She kicked off her flip-flops. She turned and ran out of the front of the store. The loss prevention officers did not chase her. They were not authorized to chase her. They stood at the front of the store and watched her run. Red, who had been walking out beside Tiffany, did not chase her. He stopped, he turned to the loss prevention officers, and he began having a conversation with them. The conversation lasted several minutes. During those minutes, Tiffany ran out into the parking lot. She was barefoot. She was wearing only what she had been wearing in the store. She had no purse, no phone, no wallet, no identification, no money, no shoes. Tiffany has not been seen by anyone in her family or by any verified witness since the moment she ran out of that Walmart at approximately 2 in the morning on September 13, 2013. The Marietta police investigation that followed was hampered, fatally, by the fact that no one in Tiffany's family reported her missing for almost 4 months. Tiffany had been estranged from her mother Lisa for most of her adult life because of her drug use. Lisa had been told by people in Red's social circle that Tiffany was just laying low, that she had probably gone somewhere to get clean, that she would turn up. Lisa, exhausted by Tiffany's drug life, had wanted to believe this. By January of 2014, 4 months in, Lisa finally went to the Marietta police and reported her daughter missing. The case was assigned to Detective Johnny Muller. Detective Moeller looked at the file the same week and immediately understood, by the cold case standards, what she had inherited. The trail, she told Lisa later, was already 4 months cold the day they handed it to her. Not a true cold case in police terminology. A born cold case. Detective Mueller's investigation over the next several years focused on Red. Red was the last person to see Tiffany before she ran out of the Walmart. Red had access to her phone. Red had told inconsistent stories to multiple people about what happened that night. Red, after Tiffany disappeared, took her phone and showed it to a friend of Tiffany's who worked at a nearby restaurant. Red called Tiffany's friends from his own phone, claiming he could not reach Tiffany. He claimed to be looking for her, but he had her phone. In the months after Tiffany's disappearance, several friend requests were accepted on Tiffany's social media accounts. Tiffany had been very active on social media before September 13th. After September 13th, she had no activity except for those friend requests. Lisa believes the requests were accepted by whoever had Tiffany's phone. The phone, like everything else Tiffany had been carrying that night, has never been recovered. In March of 2014, 6 months after Tiffany's disappearance, a drug enforcement task force raided the Powder Springs house. The raid recovered substantial quantities of methamphetamine, marijuana, and firearms. 8 people were arrested, including Red. Several months later, Detective Moeller obtained a search warrant for the home of Red's mother in Marietta, where Red had effectively been living. The home was searched. The backyard was excavated. Cadaver dogs went through the property. Nothing was found. In 2015, Red pleaded guilty in Cherokee County to possession of methamphetamine with intent to distribute and to possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. He received a sentence of 10 to 20 years. The sentencing judge, in announcing the sentence, said that he was imposing the upper end of the recommended range because he believed Red was withholding information about Tiffany's disappearance. As of the most recent reporting, Red is incarcerated at the Muskogee County Correctional Institute in Columbus, Georgia. He has continued to deny any involvement in Tiffany's disappearance. He has continued to claim he does not know what happened to her after she ran out of the Walmart. A tip received by the Cobb County District Attorney's Office in 2014 from a methamphetamine trafficker who was being prosecuted for unrelated charges suggested that Red and several of his friends had driven to Lake Allatoona, north of Atlanta, several days after Tiffany disappeared. The traffickers had heard secondhand that they had thrown a concrete-filled barrel off the Bethany Bridge into the lake. The detective followed up. He drove to the bridge. He found damage to the bridge railing that matched what the informant had described. The Georgia Department of Natural Resources searched beneath the bridge with sonar. They found a large object beneath 40 feet of water. State patrol divers went down. The object turned out to be a piece of construction concrete from the bridge itself. The damage was old. The barrel, if it had ever existed, was not where the informant had said it would be. The investigation hit a wall. Detective Mueller eventually retired. The case was passed to her successor. The successor passed it to the Cobb County Cold Case Unit in 2016. What stays with me about Tiffany's case is the moment in the front vestibule of the Walmart. Tiffany dropped her purse and kicked off her flip-flops and ran. The loss prevention officers stood watching. Red stood watching. Tiffany ran out into a parking lot full of cars at 2 in the morning. She had been high for hours. She was scared. She was running from something other than the misdemeanor shoplifting charge that the Walmart was about to file against her. She knew in that moment that there was something worse waiting for her in the lot. She had been with Red for nearly an hour inside the store. Whatever they had been arguing about, whatever Red had said to her in the aisles, whatever had been waiting in that parking lot in the truck Red had borrowed, was bad enough that $20 worth of stolen goods looked safer. She ran into the lot. She did not come back. There is no version of Tiffany's life in which the lot was the safest option. The lot was simply the closest direction. She ran the way a person runs when she has no time to plan. The lot was 1,000 cars in long rows under sodium lamps. Whoever was waiting in the lot for her was waiting in one of those cars, or behind one of them, or already moving. $20 of merchandise in her hands, 105 pounds. 5'3", barefoot. She ran. The lot took her. That is the case I find hardest to read. The last unresolved case I want to describe in this investigation took place in California in 2021. The victim was 60 years old. He had a brain injury that made him sometimes confused. He had a daughter he spoke to every day. He had a nickname his friends had called him for 40 years. He went to a Walmart and a gas station next door. He left his car in the parking lot, his wallet on the seat of the car, and his cell phone in the cup holder. He walked off into the lot. He has not been seen since. The Orange County Sheriff's Department, in the days after his disappearance, posted his missing persons flyer with a photograph of a different man. His daughter spent the first 3 weeks of the investigation trying to get them to fix the flyer. The first 3 weeks of an investigation are the only weeks that matter. His name was Scott Karsten. His friends called him Rocky. He was 5 feet 8 inches tall, 210 pounds. He had a phoenix tattooed on his upper arm. He had the name Tracy Jordan Kennedy tattooed on his left arm, the name of a daughter he had loved deeply. He had a lion tattooed on his right arm. He had been wearing a blue t-shirt, khaki shorts, and blue sneakers on the night he disappeared. Several years before, he had suffered a traumatic brain injury that had left him sometimes confused, sometimes prone to walking off in directions he did not mean to walk in. His family knew about the brain injury. His daughter Tracy spoke with him every day on the phone. She had been speaking with him every day for years. On the late evening of October 23, 2021, Scott went to a Walmart and a Circle K gas station in the same shopping plaza on Avenida Pico in San Clemente, California. He went there often. He liked the Walmart. He liked walking through the aisles. He bought small things. The plaza was about a mile from his house. He could drive there, but on the night of October 23rd, he had parked his car in the lot at the Walmart and was apparently moving between the Walmart and the Circle K on foot. The last confirmed sighting of him on store surveillance was at 12:21 in the morning on October 24th in the area between the Walmart and the Circle K. After that, no further surveillance footage has surfaced. Scott did not return home that night. He did not call Tracy the next day. Tracy realized by midday that something was wrong. Her father had not missed a daily call in the 3 years since the brain injury. She drove to her father's house. He was not there. She called the Walmart. She called the Circle K. She drove to the plaza. His car was in the Walmart lot. The doors were unlocked. His wallet was on the front passenger seat. His cell phone was in the cup holder. The keys were in the ignition. The car had not been moved in approximately 12 hours. Tracy filed a missing persons report with the Orange County Sheriff's Department on October 29th, 6 days after the last known sighting of her father. The Orange County Sheriff's Department posted the missing persons flyer on November 2nd. The photograph on the flyer was not Scott. It was the photograph of a different man, possibly someone Scott had been seen with in the past, possibly someone from his social circle. The photograph appeared on the official flyer, on the local news, and on social media for nearly 3 weeks. People in San Clemente called Tracy to tell her that the man on the flyer was not her father. They called the Sheriff's Department. The Sheriff's Department did not, for nearly 3 weeks, fix the flyer. Tracy spent those 3 weeks calling and emailing and showing up in person to demand the flyer be corrected. She told a CBS reporter in an interview later that month that no one seemed to actually be looking for her father. The flyer was the only public face of the search. The flyer had the wrong face on it. People who might have seen Scott on the night of October 23rd or 24th would not have recognized him from the flyer. People who knew Scott personally would not have called in tips because they would not have associated their friend with the photograph being shown on the news. On November 19th, 2021, the Orange County Sheriff's Department finally corrected the flyer. By that point, Scott had been missing for almost a month. Whatever evidence had been retrievable from the lot, or from witnesses who had been in the plaza on the night of October 23rd, was substantially degraded. The Sheriff's Department classified Scott as a critical missing person. They expanded their search to the open spaces west of the Walmart. They organized a search and rescue party in late December. The party found nothing. Scott has been missing for over 4 years. The brain injury that he sustained before his disappearance is what makes his case possible to interpret in two very different ways. One interpretation is that Scott, in a moment of confusion, walked off into the open spaces west of the plaza and either died of exposure or wandered until he was no longer findable. This is the interpretation the sheriff's department appears to have favored. Another interpretation is that Scott was approached in the parking lot, late at night, by someone who recognized that he was vulnerable. The brain injury was visible. The kind of confusion he could fall into was the kind of confusion an opportunistic predator could exploit. He left his wallet, his phone, and his keys in his car because he was going to come back to his car. He had no intention of leaving the lot for good. Someone, between the Walmart and the Circle K, took advantage of him. Tracy does not know which of these interpretations is true. Neither do I. The first interpretation, the wandering interpretation, has a serious problem. Scott had been confused before. He had wandered before. Every previous incident had ended with him being found, alive, generally within several hours, generally not far from where he had last been. The wandering of a man with a brain injury is not the same as a man simply vanishing for over 4 years without a trace. Every previous incident had given Tracy a phone call from a police officer in some other part of the county who had picked up her father at a gas station or a bus stop. There has been no phone call about Scott since October 23, 2021. He has not been treated at any hospital. He has not been arrested at any police station. He has not used any credit card or driven any vehicle or left any electronic trace. People who wander tend to leave traces. Scott did not. What I think, when I read this case carefully, is that something happened to Scott in that parking lot. Something happened that did not happen on any of his previous wanders. He was in the lot, between the Walmart and the Circle K, late at night, in a state of mild confusion, looking like exactly what he was. Someone in that lot saw him and made a decision. The decision was made fast. Scott may have walked toward the person voluntarily. He may have asked the person for help. The person may have offered him a ride somewhere. The person may have driven away with him in the passenger seat. The car was Scott's, and Scott had left the keys in his own car, but Scott had not been thinking about driving. He had been confused. The person in the lot understood that Scott was not going to drive away. Scott was going to walk away with him. And he did. The brain injury, which Scott's family believes lowered the bar of trust required for someone to lure him out of the lot, was a vulnerability that a normal person of average alertness would not have had. But Scott's case is not unusual in the way the predator behaved. The predator simply did the thing predators in this pattern always do. He found the moment in which the victim's defenses were lowest. The gap was different in every case. The result was the same. Now I want to step back and look at the pattern itself. 12 cases, 12 states, 6 decades. 2 of them happened in the same parking lot, separated by less than a month. 4 involved men, 8 involved women. The youngest victim was 9. The oldest was 70. The geography ranges from the Pacific Northwest to the Atlantic coast, from the upper Midwest to the Texas Panhandle. The chains range from luxury department stores in the 1960s to discount Walmart supercenters in the 21st century. The victims were rich and poor, employed and unemployed, in good health and in poor health, with happy marriages and with troubled marriages. There is no pattern in the victims. There is no pattern in the times. There is, ultimately, only one pattern. The pattern is the parking lot itself. Parking lots are the second largest land use category in the United States after residential housing. There are approximately 2 billion parking spaces in the country, more than 6 per registered vehicle. The total area covered by parking lots in the United States is greater than the area of the state of Connecticut. Most of these parking lots are surveilled by some combination of cameras, foot patrol, and ambient observation by passers-by. Most of them are well lit. Most of them are designed to be safe. The investment in their safety has been substantial across decades. They are the most engineered open spaces in American daily life, and yet they take people, not at random rates. not at high rates in any statistical sense. The number of people who go missing from parking lots each year is small relative to the population of people who walk through them, but the rate is consistent across decades. The investment in security does not deter what is happening. The investment makes the resulting cases harder to solve because the surveillance footage, when it exists, captures the moments before and the moments after, but rarely the moment itself. The moment is always in the gap. The lots are full of gaps. The lots are designed to maximize space for cars. They are not designed to maximize the visibility of people walking between cars. The cars themselves create the gaps in which the people are taken. What I want you to leave this video understanding is that the pattern is not about technology or about specific predators or about specific eras. The pattern is about a kind of place. The kind of place where a teenage girl can walk from a Woolworth's entrance to her mother's burgundy Camaro and not arrive. The kind of place where a 60-year-old man with a brain injury can walk from a Walmart to a Circle K and not arrive. The kind of place where 3 girls can park an Oldsmobile in an upper-level Sears garage and never come back to it. Parking lots are sites of routine activity. They are also sites of the small fractional percentage of human predation that leaves few, if any, evidentiary handles for police. They are not safe in the way we have collectively agreed to pretend they are. They are also not unsafe in the way that would require us to stop using them. They are something in between. They are sites of small, ongoing, almost invisible loss. A few people every year. People whose families know exactly what they were wearing, exactly what they were planning to do that evening, exactly what color the car was that they did not return to. There are some practical things I want to say before I close this investigation. They are not going to save anyone because nothing in particular saves anyone, but they are worth saying. If you set your bags down on the trunk of your car to fish for keys, take the keys out of your purse before you leave the front door of the store. Walk to your car with the keys already in your hand. The fewer seconds you spend stationary in the lot, with your hands occupied by something other than your own defense, the fewer opportunities you give to anyone who has been waiting for you. If a stranger approaches you in a lot offering to help with a flat tire, refuse the help and walk back inside the store. Tell the manager, "Wait. The lot has been there forever. It will be there in 20 minutes. You will not be there if the stranger is the kind of stranger Cindy met. If you have a brain injury, or if your father or mother has one, the lot is more dangerous than you have been prepared to believe. People with cognitive vulnerability are not safe in lots at night. They are, statistically, the easiest victims a predator can find in a public space. If you find yourself in a parking lot at night and you feel something is wrong, trust the feeling. Walk back inside. Sit in the customer service area until what you felt has lifted. The store will not refuse you that. No store will. The lot will not be offended. And one more thing. If a person you love does not come home from a store and their car is in the lot and their keys are in the car or in the lot or on the asphalt nearby, do not assume the police will move quickly. They may not. They have been trained to consider voluntary disappearance, drug use, marital trouble, and 100 other things before they will consider abduction. They will not always be wrong, but they will sometimes be wrong. The first 3 days after a disappearance are the days that matter most. If the police are not moving, you may need to move. You may need to call the news. You may need to drive yourself to the store and walk the lot. You may need to ask every employee who was working the day your loved one came in if they remember anything at all. You may need to write down every detail before you forget it. You will be tired. You will be told you are overreacting. You will be told it can wait. It cannot. Every family in this investigation that lost their person to a parking lot wished, in the years afterward, that they had moved faster in the first 3 days. They could not have known that they should have. None of us can know in advance which Tuesday afternoon is going to be the one that does not end. They moved when they realized something was wrong. By then, generally, it was already too late. That is the part of this work I cannot make easier. There is one more case I want to tell you about. It does not belong to the pattern. It is the opposite of the pattern. I want to tell you about it because the pattern is easier to understand if you know what its opposite looks like. On the 15th of January, 2026, in a Mervyn's parking lot in Victorville, California, 25 years after a 32-year-old social worker named Suzanne Sites-Fenton walked off her shift to take a break, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Cold Case Homicide Team arrested a 51-year-old man named Raymond Silva Gonzalez. Raymond was arrested at his home in Hesperia, California, less than 10 miles from a desert dump site at the corner of Mariposa Road and Ranchero Street, where Suzanne's body had been found in April of 2001. The body had been left in a pile of trash. Suzanne had been kidnapped from the parking lot of the Mervyns where she worked, sexually assaulted, and shot to death. For 25 years, the case had been classified as unsolved. For 25 years, Suzanne's husband and her 6-year-old son, who is now in his early 30s, had been waiting for the answer that would not come. The answer came in January of 2026. The cold case team had developed new leads in the year before the arrest. The sheriff's department has not publicly disclosed what those leads were. The arrest came on a Thursday. Raymond was held without bail. He was charged with murder. He had his first court appearance the following Tuesday. The point I want to make about Suzanne's case is not that her family received closure, although they did. The point is that the lot in front of the Mervyns where Suzanne walked out for her break is the same kind of lot as the lots in the 12 unsolved cases. Suzanne walked into a lot in Victorville in 2001 and did not come back out. Her case was solved. The other 12 are not. What this means is that not every parking lot disappearance is unsolvable. Some of them, given enough years and enough new investigative tools, will be solved. Suzanne's case took 25 years and the development of DNA databases and the work of a dedicated cold case unit. Some of the other cases in this investigation, given the same patience, may also be solved. The Robin case has had a person of interest in prison in Connecticut for 25 years, with one piece of physical evidence already linking him to her, waiting for the body to surface. The Jarrod case has had its primary suspect named publicly. The Sandra case has had its person of interest interviewed by a CBS reporter in the past year. The Tiffany case has had its person of interest in a Georgia prison since 2015. The possibility of resolution is small. It is not zero. And I want to take one more 30-second detour before I close. 2 of the unsolved cases I described tonight have answers from earlier in this work. In the previous video on this channel, I described the case of Naomi Irian, an 18-year-old abducted from a Walmart parking lot in Fernley, Nevada in March of 2022, and the case of Kelsey Smith, an 18-year-old abducted from a Target parking lot in Overland Park, Kansas in June of 2007. Both cases were resolved. The men responsible were identified, charged, and convicted. Both girls were recovered after death, but recovered. The pattern in both of those cases was, in some sense, the easier one to investigate. There was a perpetrator on camera. There was a vehicle leaving the lot. There was a direction of travel. The cases I have told you about tonight do not have those handles. The perpetrators were either not visible on camera or are dead or are protected by the absence of bodies. The handles are missing. The lots remain. Suzanne's case shows the handles can sometimes appear after 25 years. The other 12 are still waiting. The lot in front of the Mervyns in Victorville is now the lot in which a quarter-century of waiting ended. The lot in front of the Walmart in Searcy, Arkansas, is the lot in which Jarrod's father David sat at his kitchen table the day he found his son's truck and understood before the police did what the rolled-down windows meant. The lot at Lenox Square in Atlanta is the lot in which a security guard walked his rounds at 9 in the morning on the 15th of October, 1965, and did not see Mary's Mercury comet, which would be in that exact space 3 hours later. The lot is the connective tissue. The lot is what every one of these cases has in common. If you have read this far, share this video with someone who shops alone, who works late, who walks to their car in the dark. They will not thank you, but they will perhaps watch their lot a little more carefully tomorrow night. They will perhaps hold their keys in their hand instead of their purse. They will perhaps refuse the help of the friendly stranger who has appeared at their tire. They will perhaps not be the next case I have to spend a year researching for the next investigation in this series. There will be a next investigation. There will be more cases. The lots are still there. If you know of a parking lot disappearance I have not covered, write to me in the comments. I read every comment. I will answer the ones I can. I will look into the cases I have not yet seen. The pattern is larger than the 12 cases I have been able to document tonight. There are more cases. There are always more cases. The point is to keep counting them, and to keep learning what they have in common, and to keep asking what we have not yet been brave enough to ask about the lots we walk through every day. I am Echo 7. The next investigation begins as soon as the next family writes to me. Until then.